I'm so glad that I was able to work in all areas of nursing. I worked in the long term when I was young, and it was kind of like being able to see my future through the eyes of where I was at that present. Even at this point now, I was saying to the lady, I said, well, I've already trained for this time of my life anyway. She said, trained? I said, yeah, that's 30 years old and I was training for this time. The mental training of getting all those ghosts away. I finally could let that wounded child go and let her grow up and be whatever she wanted. Not what someone wanted her to be, but what she wanted to be.
Welcome to Real Talk with Mark West, a podcast about owning your shit and playing through life.
I do's what I want.
I do's what I want. I do's what I want. If people would just accept that, we could get along. Come to me if you want to. I ain't scared. Shit, I bike in Chicago. I feel like I'm Neo in the Matrix, but I suck at it. I'm dodging right into the bullets, you know?
This is good therapy.
I'm your host, Mark West. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Real Talk with Mark West, where we are trying to have better conversations with ourselves so we can have better conversations with others. But we definitely gonna be having some fun along the way. I am really stoked about this week. We've had great weather in the city. I got 3 new houseplants, and I've got a pretty dope episode lined up for you today. I've been gaining some self-awareness, and I've got a special guest on the show dropping some pearls of wisdom. So we're gonna be taking a trip today, y'all. I once won an Easter raffle at church, and when they announced the prize, I got really excited because I thought I won a new house. But it was a new house plant. Anyways, this time I really am fucking excited about my new house plants. I got 3 because you can't just get 1. Like, literally, you can't. Like, you think you're gonna, but you're not. You're gonna get 3. So the first one was actually a gift from my cousin Tasha. Thanks, cuz. She propagated a rubber tree cutting for me, which is beautiful. My Ficus elastica. Then that got me thinking how I wanted more tall plants and had an empty spot for one. So I walked to the plant store down the street from my apartment and saw the cutest 4-foot fiddle leaf fig. I just had to have her, Miss Ficus lyrata. But wouldn't you know, while I was there, I found one of my dream plants that I wanted to find at a reasonable price. Miss Sansevieria masoniana, or the rare whale fin snake plant. I am so super stoked about my new beauties, but especially that one. Pics coming to Instagram soon, so make sure you's following. I needed these plants, like, for real. I needed them because I have been stuck in my head. Plants kind of bring me back to reality when I'm lost in thought. I've just been working through some personal things and, need to do something about these thoughts that I'm thinking, but I just...
Hey Mark, what you thinking?
Oh, thanks for asking, Jonathan. I'm thinking about blind spots. Try this with me. Unless you're driving, then try this later. But stick both thumbs up straight out in front of you. Then bring your hands together so your knuckles are touching. Close your left eye and stare at your left thumb with your right eye. Now, while still looking at your left thumb, start to slowly move your right thumb away from your left hand. keeping your eye on your left thumb. Keep moving your right hand until... Where'd it go? Did you see it? Or rather, did you not see it? If you could follow my instructions, your right thumb disappeared. Try it again with the opposite thumb and eye. The same thing will happen. We all have blind spots in our eyes, the place where the optic nerve connects to the eyeball. Why don't we notice it? Our vision overlaps, so anything in our blind spot is seen by the other eye. I know it's pretty self-explanatory, but I'm sure you've guessed by now where this episode is going, but I want to challenge an idea. When we think about blind spots, we tend to automatically go straight to a talk about civil relations, those malignant cultural blind spots. We usually talk about blind spots on a societal level, being blind to other people's struggles and experiences. But we also have many blind spots when it relates to ourselves. Those smaller, more benign blind spots that affect us personally and the life we're trying to build. Sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we've been through and overcome. It may feel like resilience, humility, or facing life's challenges, but we don't ever stop to take a moment to exhale and reassess both ourselves and our situation. We could become blind to the fact that we have progressed to new stages in life, but are still using old strategies that worked for a time and place, but don't entirely make sense anymore. Last week I talked about changing my perception, how I think and feel and talk about myself. This may seem elementary and one of those toxic positivity taglines, especially with the world still doing what it do. But that's exactly why it's important. Our past intentions and experiences condition and perpetuate our present intentions, habits, and reactions. How we live our lives today requires wisdom, and wisdom is self-knowledge. Our beliefs about ourselves come with blind spots, shadows in our vision. Wisdom sees that light and dark are inseparable, and that shadows are also light. Wisdom says, seek to know your blind spots. I was a fucking mess leading up to my break in January. I was barely functioning. I was in a fog of rage, confusion, darkness, and self-hatred. I'd lost all desire and motivation and was going through the motions. It felt like I dug myself into a ditch, and I didn't really know if I should climb out or just wait for the dirt to pile on top of me. I was at a crossroad, and I had to make a choice. What now? As I grappled with this quarter-life crisis, I shut the world out and locked myself in my room at the top of my apartment tower in the Westwood, Chicago neighborhood of Logan Square. Alone with my plants, my thoughts, and my loyal Black Panther. I wasn't waiting on no prince. Fuck that. I was waiting on purpose. A reason. Meaning to all of this. I got where I was on purpose. I made choices that got me here. Still stuck in a cycle I've been trying years to escape. What could it be? What more could life want from me? I got a cornbread recipe. I was stuck. I'm not going to let this situation drive me insane. If I'm doing the same thing over and over and it doesn't work, try something else, anything else. So, from my lonely tower, I decided to do the unthinkable. An act so left field and radical, it's yet to get FDA approval. I reached out and asked for help. I sought out a differing perspective. I communed with the Force. Well, I called someone, not to talk, but to listen. I learned something about myself. I had a major blind spot to some destructive habits that I've been holding on to. It's easy to see and choose not to see the obvious neuroses that get in the way of achieving what we want, like procrastination, confrontational attitude, disorganization, low self-esteem. But I had no idea there could be things that I consider characteristics, personality traits, that are old coping strategies cemented in my behavior. Something seemingly innocent, like self-isolation, could be hindering my connections with other people and negatively affecting my outlook and outcomes.
This train is now running express. Our next stop is Westworld.
We're about to cover some ground and make some leaps to get to where I'm trying to go. Things on my end are tired and stale, and I'm ready for a glow up. I'm done living my life on autopilot, externalizing my problems, and getting swept up in easy distractions. More often than not, even though we are avidly seeking happiness, we are creating a certain amount of misery in the process. Mindfulness, awareness, enlightenment, living my best life, for me, it's about returning to my original self. How I was before all this bullshit taught me lessons I shouldn't have clung to. I need to unfreeze my patterns and find my authentic self, my inner child. That's what much of that phone call was about that day. And I wanted to continue it here on my podcast in hopes that it might help you like it helped me. Today's guest, Marquita from Missouri, is a retired nurse and currently works with a 12-step support group during retirement as a way of helping others. She worked in many areas during her nursing career, including child and adolescent psychiatry. There were many good reasons to reach out to this person for support, but my main reason was because Marquita is actually...
I am your aunt.
Yes. This is my Aunt Marquita, y'all. Say hi, everybody. But before we go into this, I gotta be real. As I was studying to prepare for this talk, I noticed some of the subtle traits that I possess that are actually learned coping mechanisms. I started to get kind of sad, kind of angry, and a little bit hurt. Mostly because I was completely unaware of how much I'd been neglecting myself emotionally and mentally, but also because I now see how much I have contributed to my situation through my choices and behavior. I was only sad for a moment though, because since I knew how I got here, I now know what I need to get out. I don't know exactly how, but after the journey of the past few months, I've shown up for myself in ways I didn't think I was capable. There is a fear of the unknown. Like, what will my life look like without these strategies? These strategies I've relied on and that have seemingly worked for me most, if not all, of my life. I know it will be my life because I won't be responding to the world based on past or inherited traumas. The things we learn or teach ourselves to deal with negative environment or experiences can become personality traits when we grow up. We will continue to react to situations in the same way we did during the negative experience, whether we're conscious of it or not. It makes logical sense in my head. I find no fault in it. But I'm still reacting to a past event rather than responding to the present moment. So to other people, it doesn't make much sense, and it can affect them negatively and drive a wedge between us. Two that I'm recognizing and trying to deal with are secrets and self-isolation. But I would also like to discuss a couple others that seem innocent and self-protective, but could be having a negative impact on someone's life. A lot of times, we're not responding to the situation, we're responding to how the situation made us feel. And that could be because of a number of reasons and experiences in our past. That's why wisdom, self-awareness, is always the goal. When I called my aunt, she actually talked with me about things I spoke on in my podcast, Buddhism and the ideas of healing your inner wounded child. It was similar to concepts that she had studied and was teaching in her support groups. That's when she first mentioned secrets as a coping strategy for difficult situations. I had always considered myself a private person. I thought it was a trait of mine. But when she said that and explained how it tied to unhealed wounds, I was completely dumbfounded. I'm taking these ideas with a grain of salt. Now, I know I said I'm committed to the process, but I obviously said that before I knew what would be involved. So, my anxiety is on 1,000. I'm crossing a tightrope over a misty cavern and I gotta take a shit. That's how I'm feeling right now. Like, these two strategies in particular are essential to my need to feel safe. But if I'm protecting myself from a threat that's no longer there, at what point does it become unhealthy? Why work on something that's normal? After our pleasantries and introducing her to my new plant, I got right to it. I actually didn't know about my aunt's background in mental health and well-being prior to our phone call, so when we spoke again, I asked her how she got into it.
Well, let's see. It started with my own personal. I was in a 12-step substance abuse program, and I was in there at 37 years old, and I am now 77, and I don't give my age out, but the world now knows. And later there was an in-depth of more than just getting rid of the substance. You had to live, and that living was considered emotional sobriety. And going through a grief period, I had a psychiatrist going through that grief period of losing my husband, introduced me to the adult children, and that a lot of my problems could be stemmed deeper. And a lot of times we don't see those deep things. It's like we're adults. What happened then? It's over. Pass on, But it still stays deep within your DNA, within your core. It's still there. And it comes out if you have illnesses, if any life-changing, it will come back at you. Unless you get to the so-called core of the onion's going to always be having you crying. So about 2009, getting with some ladies, and we started a program, and it was called the Adult Children of Alcoholics / Dysfunctional Family. A lot of times people don't want to acknowledge, if you say the word dysfunctional, and I know a particular person that every time I would say, something about the family and, what I'm doing, and, maybe you should check into that. Nope, that's your problem, not mine. They look at it as extreme. Well, the whole world's doing this. It's okay. Well, there are certain things that the whole world might be doing that I might not want to do. I'll give you an example where some people would never think this. Military children. My best friends grew up in the military. I didn't realize that when I was looking, and I went, military? Well, it's that staunch rigidity.
I hear that. I feel that 100%.
Well, I was going to say, preachers' kids, too.
Whoa. Hold on now. Ooh, y'all done made me pull this train over. What was that she said?
Preacher's kids, too.
Preacher's kids?
I think I need to lay down for a sec.
There's subtle things in like adult children dealing with older parents. And, maybe they've got to a point they're sick. And the one lady was speaking about, I should not hate my mother. I don't really hate, I just hate what's happening. And she was making all these excuses, and she started pulling up some things that happened, and she realized there's a little resentment there. So it's not that you have been physically abused or something like that. And it was the idea that the neglect was her mom was a workaholic. She worked all the time. And then when she retired, she got sick. And there was a little hurt there because she missed her mom. She never had one. And she didn't know how to deal with the idea of emotions because no one showed her. No one would think of that as being dysfunctional, that the mom was working. And I go back on that. I talk with my own children about that, how I worked very hard when I was single, but when I married again, then I forgot that I had someone to help, and I just kept going. And there was a fear factor, fear of poverty.
Okay, I see that. But show me the harm in wanting to be alone. What is wrong with dealing with things privately? Why stop what's worked for me since I was young?
Because a lot of people are still using the same coping strategy they used when they were 10, 15, and they are now 30, 35. I could even make it even sound worse, because if you're 70 and you're still acting 15, that might be, it might look kind of strange. People say, well, I'm youthful acting, Great, because that's what I believe in. That's the gift of longevity. But I'm not going to use the same method I used at 10 years old to get out of school, to get out of work. I mean, maybe I've called in sick so many times. My poor grandmother has died about 15 times. I'm still using those coping skills rather than just getting down. Why are you calling in so much? What is going on here? At one time, I didn't like to stay in. I didn't like to stay by myself. It's not that I was afraid. I didn't like to hear the voices in my own head. And I don't mean in a psychiatric type of way, voices. And it was, if I could be in a crowd, I could enmesh myself. Or I could be someone else in that crowd. And a crowd didn't have to be any more than 3 or 4 people. And I never understood why that was. I didn't like to be with me. And it was those negative voices were always at me. You don't do this right. You don't do that right. A lot of times I wouldn't let a lot of people visit me because my house is not, looking like House Beautiful. Wait till I clean up before I open the door. So it's better not to open the door and make up an excuse. And COVID was a good excuse. Oh, no, don't come in. And I'm aware of that, very much aware of that now. So that is something to work on, something that apparently I've been carrying with me as my own coping mechanism. Do not come into my world. It's like I'm playing a game of, who I am. For these people, I'm this person. For that other people, I'm someone else. One of the things that is like a mantra, don't trust, don't talk, don't feel. That's the negative mantra. So you will start learning to trust. You start learning to talk. You start learning to feel. Sometimes I would feel how someone I thought wanted me to feel. I didn't know what that feeling was. I had a hard time with crying. Be strong. That was always in the back of my mind. Be strong. Be strong. It's not always the male gender that has to deal with that. You know, I'm so glad that I was able to work in all areas of nursing. I worked in the long term when I was young. And it was kind of like being able to see my future through the eyes of where I was at that present. Even at this point now, I was saying to the lady, I said, well, I've already trained for this time of my life anyway. She said, trained? I said, yeah, I was 30 years old and I was training for this time. The mental training of getting all those ghosts away. I was tired of carrying that hurt, wounded child around. That is what really got to me finally. I'm like, I am too old to be carrying that child around still. When I got into that program, I was 65. But I realized, I said, wow, I finally could let that wounded child go and let her grow up and be whatever she wanted. Not what someone wanted her to be, but what she wanted to be. You know, and that's when I realized that people do not give themselves permission to be a child. And how can you give yourself permission when your child was wounded and you don't want to go back there? Especially if you've been taught you do this, you do that. Everything has to be according to a certain way things are done. And yes, I did. I was grown that way because the parents were grown up that way. Everybody has their own way. And only when I accepted that that's what was going on could I accept what was going on within me without being resentful. Hurt people hurt people. This is not about bashing your parents by no means. It is not about bashing. It is about living with what you already know what the negatives are. Let's work on the positives. Loving yourself.
I don't like to be around others during difficult situations because the voices in my head are louder and even more negative than when I'm alone. Voices echoing memories from times when I was unsafe. My inner voices. Keeping people away doesn't keep disappointment away. It doesn't keep hurt, frustration, or dissatisfaction away. All it does is welcome them. Don't trust, don't talk, don't feel. That used to keep us safe, but it doesn't anymore. When I was studying, I found 4 traits that jumped out at me as things that seem innocuous or normal, but maybe pointing at some unfinished conversations. I already mentioned the first one, self-isolating. Self-isolating is part of a coping strategy used to self-soothe, but it can push away well-meaning friends who may think that person no longer wants to be friends. It causes barriers. Number 2, inconsistency. Making promises and following through on just a few of them or none, often disappointing others. They usually mean well and want to help everyone or be able to handle everything, but for some reason they always seem to overcommit. The third one, frequent lying. Telling lies for no significant reason, perhaps worrying about what other people may think. It may be a panic response, but trust is built on honesty. Isn't my baby cute? Yes. And finally, approval seeking. In our quest to make others happy, which is often done to protect ourselves, we may lose touch with our true selves, adding to the confusion and frustration already felt. Each person's past experiences are unique. The goal is to live as my authentic self, not a coping mechanism. I was made aware of my blind spot, but now I see more of me. I'm gaining wisdom. My life felt like it was spiraling out of control, so I receded inside my shell like I've done 1,000,000 times and hoped what was happening would go away. Instead of learning how to face it, learning more about myself. I share that alcoholism and substance abuse is a tradition on both sides of my family. I never saw my father drink, but he told me of his earlier struggles as a teenage alcoholic. I also knew most of my extended family drank. I shared that my first introduction to mindfulness was reading the Serenity Prayer as a kid, which is about accepting the things I cannot change and changing the things I can. Then at the end, it asks for wisdom to know the difference, knowing what I can control and what I can't. That's not just a mantra for those in recovery. The mystic and poet Rumi said, "The intelligent desire self-control. Children want candy." The Stoics said, "The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control and which have to do with the choices I actually control." That was Epictetus. It's the meaning of the word philosophy, a love of wisdom, harnessing what philosophy teaches, then wielding it in the real world. And is there really a distinction between psychological and spiritual distress? What is philosophy? Doesn't it mean preparing to meet whatever will come our way? Epictetus again. I want to be wise, and I don't get to choose what I see and have to do to get there. Wisdom is greatly facilitated by seeing my little hypocrisies and large illusions, and learning to be more forthright and honest with myself and others. I got that from a book. Now that I see what's in my control, I should probably take action. What do you think about all this? Honestly, I'd like to hear back from you. www.heymarkwest.com. I want to say a special thank you to my Aunt Marquita for her time and insight, as well as Jonathan from Chicago for getting the conversation started at the top of the show. I need a break from all this soul searching and want to dive into something fun. Next week, we're going to start talking with some friends about living our best life. I want to know, what fills you up? What's something you really love to do? Maybe it's biking, traveling, or slow cooking the city's best carnitas. Let's talk about it. But until then, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you got something out of it, please leave a review, follow and subscribe, and of course, share this episode with a friend. It takes just a couple seconds, but the impact and my gratitude are immeasurable, as every little bit helps in growing awareness. To find more episodes, or to talk back to me about your journey, visit heymarkwest.com. There you'll find my social media links, as well as additional resources for support. I'm Mark West, and until next time, don't forget, you are a rock star. You've got this. Join me next week for Real Talk with Mark West.